Well, hello and welcome everyone to this training session on how to engage your member of Congress on nuclear issues. My name is Chris Rastanpour, and I'm the Policy and Communications Coordinator with the Physicists Coalition for Nuclear Threat Reduction, which hosts this meeting. A couple of housekeeping guidelines, given that this is a meeting and not a webinar. Please kindly keep yourself muted when not speaking, and please use the Zoom's hand raising function if you'd like to ask a question or offer a comment. So you're probably well aware that the coalition aims to work to reduce the threats from nuclear weapons by mobilizing advocacy within the physical sciences community since it was founded in 2019. Since the start of our partnership with the Arms Control Association in October 2022, we have tried to use this opportunity and provide our members with more resources, education, and tools and guidelines so that they can advocate for this cause more effectively. So today's training session is one of these resources. Just to give you an idea of what's on the agenda for today, in this session, we'll be talking about the value and impact of different types of advocacy, how to schedule a meeting with your congressperson, the steps of a legislative or lobby meeting, including storytelling and making a hard ask. And then we're going to talk about post-meeting follow-up and escalation to make these meetings more impactful. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some nuclear policy priorities for the coalition. And to get this conversation started on these topics, here with me, I have four wonderful speakers and advocates for nuclear threat reduction. I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order. So we have with us Denise Duffield, who is an advisor and leading organizer at the Back from the Brink campaign, which is a national grassroots campaign that brings communities together to abolish nuclear weapons. She's the associate director of the Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles and leads PSR-LA's participation in the Back from the Brink campaign. In addition, she leads PSR-LA's efforts to clean up the Santa Suana Field lab, a contaminated nuclear and rocket engine testing site located just 30 miles from downtown LA, and she's also the board president of the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability, which is a national network of organizers that works to address the issue of nuclear weapons production and waste cleanup. We also have with us Dr. Laura Grego, who's a senior scientist and research director of the Global Security Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, where she has worked at the intersection of science and public policy, in particular nuclear weapons, missile defense, and space security issues for 20 years. She's also on the steering committee of the Physicists Coalition for Nuclear Threat Reduction and one of our project team members who bring our colloquia on nuclear threat reduction to institutions across the country. I can see in the other participants that we have other members of the project team here, so welcome. She has authored or co-authored numerous papers on a range of topics, including cosmology, space security, and missile defense, and has testified before Congress and addressed the UN General Assembly and the UN Conference on Disarmament on security issues. We also have with us Sean Meyer, who is a strategic advisor and consultant to Back from the Brink, which he co-founded in 2017. A longtime nuclear disarmament organizer and policy advocate, Sean served as manager of strategic campaigns for the Union of Concerned Scientists Global Security Program from 2007 to 2021. He previously served as coordinator of the Congressional Roundtable on Post-Cold War Relations among various nonprofit and private sector positions. And then we also have with us Stephen Young, who's a senior representative of the Union of Concerned Scientists. So he lobbies administration officials, members of Congress, and their staff to advance UCS security-related campaigns, largely focusing on arms control, nuclear weapons policy, missile defense, and nuclear threat reduction programs. He also works with scientists across the country to help amplify their concern on critical national security policies. And he's written numerous articles and publications on nuclear weapons policy and arms control, and works with journalists to expand and improve reporting on these issues. So without further ado, I'm going to go to two of our guest speakers from the Back from the Brink campaign. Sean and Denise, why don't you get us started?
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Chris, and to the coalition. And it's great and wonderful to see my my former UCS colleagues. As Chris mentioned, I spent 14 years working with both Stephen and Laura at the Union of Concerned Scientists, and have spent a great deal of time organizing and working with scientists and folks in academia. So this feels like home a little bit to me, and thank you all for taking the time to out of your day to join us today. I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes sort of talking about two sort of specific advocacy ideas. But I want to sort of start with sort of what I kind of hope would be one sort of key takeaway that for all of you, and something that I've sort of been reinforced for me throughout my career as an organizer, and that is that one person, you, can actually make a real difference and have an actual impact on the decisions and positions and votes of a member of Congress or other decision makers. We have seen it countless times. And perhaps in addition to that, I want to sort of just stress, sort of in a broad sense that as we'll talk about today, there's sort of countless ways in which one can be a policy advocate that really conform to your skills, to your interests, and of course your time. And perhaps lastly, I would say that an important ingredient of sort of being a good sort of advocate from the grassroots is taking the time to sort of coordinate with folks like us who sort of do this for a living. You've got great people and resources here today who can advise you on sort of key policy asks or who a staff person might be, and just sort of consider folks like the Physicists Coalition or the Union of Concerned Scientists or those of us at Back from the Brink as resources that can be called on at any time. So I want to just spend a few minutes talking about two very specific advocacy ideas. And the first is what I might call building respectful relationships with congressional staff members. And over the years that I worked at UCS, I worked with a number of scientists and folks in academia like yourselves who did just that, who took the time to know who that particular staff person in their House member's office or their senator's office, in many cases, that staff person working on defense and nuclear weapons issues is called the MLA, the Military Legislative Assistant. Sometimes that staffer is the legislative director who has responsibility for that particular sort of issue portfolio, sort of defense, foreign policy issues. And there's just tremendous opportunity as an individual, as a constituent, to reach out to those staff people, again, with guidance and sort of support from folks like us, to introduce yourself as a constituent, as someone who is interested in these issues, in nuclear weapons, and so I wanted to sort of just put that out as a sort of a general idea. I think that, of course, these staff people are busy, but as a first step, it's often good to just sort of get from us the name of that person, their title, their email address, and reach out to them. Send them an email saying, "Hi, I'm so and so from your city or town. I'm a constituent of Senator so and so. I would love to take to schedule a 5-10 minute phone conversation to introduce myself to you and learn a little bit more about the senator's views on X." And what we have found is that if that kind of dialogue and relationship building happens in a respectful and, let's say, non-annoying way, that those staff people actually come to rely on the views and expertise of folks like that. And again, I think one has to be kind of deliberate about how frequently you have that kind of communication. Again, you don't want to be overbearing or overcritical, but there have been many instances where we know, for example, that say that particular member of Congress is a member of a committee that's about to have a vote on an issue of concern to us. I have seen countless examples where one staff person has called that military legislative assistant and said, "I understand there's going to be a vote this coming Thursday in the Appropriations Subcommittee on X. I'd love to, understand the senator's view." And that phone call has actually changed that person's position going into that committee vote. We've seen it repeatedly. So I want to just sort of encourage that as something with our support and the support of folks, at the coalition, that you all, if that's something that's sort of within your comfort zone, can think about doing. And just as a little tangent to that, some of the same the same notion applies not just to the staff members of your members of Congress, but also to other state and local elected officials. The Back from the Brink campaign is very focused on engaging state and local elected officials, mayors, city councilors, state legislators, and really we're making the argument that those elected officials have a voice in key role on the issue of nuclear weapons and nuclear disarmament. We organized a letter and got hundreds of local and state elected officials on a letter to send to President Biden. Those same elected officials are folks that you can be interacting with in the staff people for those mayors, et cetera. And so some of the same things that I said earlier apply to them. Learning who the mayor's chief of staff is or chief policy advisor, and working with us to open up a dialogue with your mayor or your state representative about why this issue, nuclear weapons, is something that they should be thinking about and ways in which they can get involved. So that's sort of subject number one, sort of just building relationships, sort of cooperative, constituent relationships with key staff people of your elected officials. The other thing I just wanted to quickly talk about, and probably some of you have already done this, which is sign-on letters. Over the years at UCS, UCS does a lot of sign-on letters, of getting scientists and folks in academia to organize on their campus to write to their member of Congress about a specific issue. So, what has always, felt very good about sign-on letters is it's a great organizing tool. Say, you're in the physics department, but you would like to send a letter urging your member of Congress or senators to co-sponsor a bill, or that there's a big vote coming up on some issue. It's a way for you have this tool now, a sign-on letter that you can bring to other colleagues in other departments to say, hey, a group of us in the physics department are organizing this letter. We would love to build support across the campus on this letter. And so it's a great sort of way to kind of have dialogue with other folks on campus and sort of learn who some of your like-minded colleagues are, who might also be interested in nuclear disarmament and nuclear risk reduction issues. So again, the folks at UCS do this all the time, and have their science network, and so I'm going to just stop there as two things that sort of two very sort of discrete sort of advocacy ideas that you might be thinking about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise.
Hi, everybody. Just following up on one of the key messages that Sean talked about, which was building relationships is important for any and all ways of advocacy. In general, I think all of them have value. And I'll go through some of these emails versus visits versus letters to the editor, but some of the key factors that can determine the impact would be who is writing, how many people are taking part, and how close one is to your target. So starting out from the distance, we have emails, individualized emails or form emails. A form email looks something like, I'll put it in the chat, if you've all gotten these, you've sent them out, you've responded to them, everyone in the meeting. And then moving forward to get a little bit closer, there are phone calls, which Sean also talked about, and then visits. And of course, a whole other lane would be letters to the editor and op-eds. Those also can have value, but again, through who's writing and where that's placed, I think are some of the major factors for impact. What I thought I would do is use kind of a little bit of a case study from a recent meeting we had with Judy Chu. So I'm beginning with how to schedule that actual meeting. And many times you go onto the website and there'll be sort of a form you can fill out. I still think a phone call is good to the office and find out who's responsible for scheduling to get their information. Always to identify as a constituent is key. So recently, we have a House Resolution H-Res 77 right now, and we just did a sign-on letter in service of that. And a PSRLA member contacted me and said, I just reached out to my constituent, Judy Chu, and I have a meeting scheduled with her. Should I ask her to introduce legislation? Should I talk to her about, all these other things? And so I said, well, are you sure you got a meeting with her? Because often a first effort even from a constituent, you will get a legislative aid or not necessarily the congressperson themselves. And he said, no, I did. So we went into then the factors of preparing for that meeting to make it so we could make it as impactful as possible. So the importance of preparation can also be overstated. So we did research. We found where she had signed on to H-Res 54, which was also about a world without nuclear weapons, where on her website she had statements about ultimately seeing a world without nuclear weapons. So we could come in and we could thank her for her past position and sort of build off that and say, if we want to see a world, ultimately, if you want to see a world without nuclear weapons, we should probably get started on that now. One of the key thrust of our campaign and of this resolution is agreements among nuclear armed states to eliminate their arsenals. Those agreements take time. So we were sort of able to build it from that. We built a team that had constituents from interfaith. We have a Habakasha group. In past meetings, we've also brought in, former military or students or climate activists or justice activists, trying to find constituents if we can, but really representing diverse points of view so that in that meeting, it's more impactful. It's not just one group. It's not just one position. People are coming at it from different points. The other thing that was key to that meeting, I think was we were respectful, we practiced. That's another thing. I think preparation, and part of preparation in ANA, we have DC days every year. We're fixing to do that third week of April. And we begin with the training and we role play even. We have somebody, you're the person to ask, you're the team leader, you're the aide. And then we often have it where, we have someone play the congressperson who just walks into the meeting and how we react. And we sort of like give feedback on how that went. So we really prepare. In this meeting, it was a Zoom meeting with Representative Chu. So we just did that kind of amongst ourselves. We had a pre-call. After that meeting, we then it was time for follow-up. So the constituent who got the meeting, he wrote back a thank you. He gave some additional materials. We got a strong maybe during the meeting. I probably will support that. And then I think a couple of days went by, and we had another person, Bob Dodge, our board president, sort of do his sort of like thank you and follow up. And it took, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks after that meeting, but she did sign on to HRS 77. So we were sort of employing, and you know, we're having other folks having those same meetings, and their mileage may vary. So I think that we, you know, sort of a combination of things happened that made this impactful. Sometimes you don't get the right person. Sometimes you have someone who, you know, there's all kinds of factors that vary, but the ingredients for a successful meeting, which is, you know, getting the right person, being a constituent, doing preparing for the meeting, doing good follow-up, I think are sort of the key factors that can make for an impactful visit with your representative, and on all levels too. As Sean mentioned, we also work with local and state officials, hoping to sort of bring them into some of the federal advocacy at some point. And then I think, yeah, and you know, those are my main contributions would be, you know, who's participating, how many, being prepared, and doing follow-up, and in all of those, you know, really putting our best foot forward in terms of how we talk and present ourselves, and being, you know, respectful and humble. And we also kept saying with Judy too, and I think this was impact, that we wanted to be a resource for her if she had, you know, anything else going on, and sort of try to make it a two-way relationship. And we hope to build on that now, because we need champions in Congress, and just because somebody signed on to a resolution does not make them a champion. So we plan to now maintain that relationship. We will be doing a California sign-on letter, and she will be getting that with a big thank you from those California groups. When we have, we will be getting other resolutions, municipal resolutions, some in her district. We really want Pasadena. We will, you know, keep letting her know about our efforts, so that we're continuing to build that relationship even past getting the yes on the co-sponsorship.
Thank you so much, Sean and Denise, for that wonderful introduction to basically different tools and different methods of advocacy. And on that note, Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Sean and Denise. Yeah, so really much of what Sean and Denise covered is what I was going to cover as well. Really, it is not about a meeting, it's about a relationship. That really is what matters the most. Because think about your own life. If you meet somebody randomly one time, talk to them, it might be an interesting conversation, but it doesn't really change your life very often. But if you have a relationship with somebody, you listen to them, think about their views, they become important to you. And it really is totally possible to have a relationship with, definitely with the staff of a member's office, maybe with a member themselves. So definitely possible you can do that as one person. You can do those things on your own, with help from us, and just being thoughtful about how you do it. So really the key thing to think about is you need to be thinking about what they are trying to do in their life, because you have your interests and asks, and those are important. And that's what we're trying to get accomplished here, is make progress on nuclear weapons issues. But that's not their focus. They have to be a member of Congress as a staff person, or a member who has a bunch of competing demands on their time. So you need to be thoughtful, as Sean said, about how you approach them and what you ask them to do, and when you ask it. And so basically, congressional offices, so that the MLA, as Sean mentioned, the Military Legislative Aid, or Foreign Policy Aid, or Foreign Policy Advisor, there are a bunch of titles and offices. They're all most of the same thing. That person may cover 6 issues. They do energy and nuclear weapons and missile defense, as well as transportation. And so they just have a bunch of things on their plate. This is the common issue we face. It all too often, the staff are just all swamped with things that they have to get done, and they don't have time for things that don't help them do their job. So what you need to be thinking about is trying to find asks that fit into things they can do at the right time and place. And you can figure those things out yourself, or we're happy to help you do that as well. You can basically just things like, if you want to have some impact an issue, like trying to help cancel the new sea-launched nuclear armed cruise missile that Biden administration is trying to cancel, but Congress is now supporting. There's a cycle of when those things happen, and right now is a good time in the cycle, because they're started the Congress, so looking at the issues, but it's going to build up through a whole cycle of, first, the National Defense Authorization Act will come up in the House. That's the main bill where defense issues are considered in most detail. And so if you wanted something on that issue, the time to start thinking about that is now, but it'll come to the floor probably in June or July. So that's when the key votes will happen, is June or July. So just the natural cycles, you can learn relatively easily about when that type of ask is most appropriate. If you want that member something else out of the congressional cycle, it gets a little harder because you basically have to ask them to do something that's not in their natural order of doing things. You can do that for sure, but it is harder if you aren't making an ask that fits into what they can do readily. And so I'm always happy to give advice about what a good ask is and what the good timing for the ask is. I'm sure Chris can help as well on these questions. It really is just being thoughtful about trying to make sure what you want your member to do is something they want to do, because basically if you're a constituent, they do want to respond to your requests when they can, but you can't ask for the moon. You have to ask for things that they can do easily. So for example, sending onto a letter, as Sean and Denise mentioned, is relatively light lift for them. So it's a letter from other members of Congress. I can join a letter to the president on this issue. It's something I can do that relatively quickly. It doesn't require too much from me, and constituent asked, I can get that done. So we've done a number of letters from members of Congress to the administration or to other officials in the administration saying, hey, please consider this, take this into respect. Those are things that's naturally in the congressional cycle. That's something that they do regularly, and they're quite comfortable doing that. A couple of other thoughts on the congressional office, just to be aware that, as Sean said, there is the military LA is the person you most want to talk to. They also are people who are legislative correspondents, and they basically deal with email coming in and don't have any influence at all on the issues themselves. So you try and not interact with them. But for members, you actually can, with some effort, get a relationship with your member of the House in particular. The Senator is much harder, but in the House, it is definitely possible to have a relationship with your member of the House if you work at it for a while. Now, of course, the easiest way to do that is to give money, sadly. It's just the reality that if you want to have a member meeting, you can get a member meeting guaranteed if you give money. If you give a chunk of change, there's no way they'll turn you down. But if you don't want to do that, it's pretty reasonable not to want to do that. It's helpful to have it be a group meeting. Basically, but if you are a constituent, particularly if you are a professor at a college in the district, that and you can get a few colleagues to join you, it's not that hard at all to get a member meeting to say, hey, Mr. Member of Congress, I have these colleagues with me who want to meet with you and talk about weapons issues. And you can do it either in district or in DC over Zoom. They're doing Zoom meetings now all the time, and they're used to that. It's pretty straightforward to have it happen. And it's basically saves them time as well, because you're in and out more quickly than you are for an in-person meeting. But you can do in-person meetings in district, and actually are more effective than Zoom meetings, quite frankly, because you just, again, it's a relationship. It's easier to have a relationship if you do a meeting in person than it is over Zoom. So that's most of what I was going to cover, because I know we have other people looking as well. So I'll leave it at that for now and have a safe time discussion. Thanks all.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that introduction and walking us through, tips for meeting with members of Congress. Laura, you're up next. If you'd like to share some of the coalition's policy priorities with us, and then after that, we can go to Q&A.
Yep. Thanks so much. Those are really great and really helpful. I'm going to just kind of walk through some of the policy advocacy campaigns that the coalition has done previously and the one that we're working on now. In the past, we've helped members set up meetings with representatives on 3 key issues, encouraging the US to adopt a no first use policy, discouraging the US from resuming nuclear testing, and supporting arms control diplomacy between the US and Russia. And these advocacy campaigns were chosen for their impact, for their timeliness, and their relevance to the coalition's mission. And this is the coalition's mission statement, which is on the website. And I hope it's pretty new, but I hope that you get a chance to take a look at it. As I mentioned, in the past, we've done no first use, no resumption of nuclear testing. These are specific pieces of legislation, and our present one is arms control diplomacy. So the no first use policy, as you know, current U.S. nuclear posture review reserves the option to use nuclear weapons first in conflict at the sole discretion of the president. The president has expressed many times, this particular president, support for a change in policy to no first use of nuclear weapons. We know that's actually his personal policy preference, and that their sole purpose should be deterrence. In 2021, Representative Adam Smith introduced a bill into the House, which would establish the sole purpose of U.S. nuclear weapons would be to deter nuclear attacks. And that would signal strong support for this policy while the administration considered its nuclear posture. And so the coalition asked our members to urge the member of Congress to co-sponsor this legislation. And for more information, you can see our one pager on no first use on the website. And when we do an advocacy campaign, in general, we try to have a webinar for sort of education on the issue. We have a one pager, so that stuff is available in detail to our members. And then we have the advocacy component. The second campaign was to push to make sure that the U.S. didn't resume nuclear testing. President Trump indicated interest in resuming explosive nuclear tests. And in June 2020, the Senate Armed Services Committee approved Senator Tom Cotton's amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, authorizing at least $10 million to, quote, carry out projects related to reducing the time required to execute a nuclear test if necessary. The National Nuclear Security Administration said there's no technical need for a test. So we had some support from them. And in July 2020, Representative Ben McAdams' amendment to the NDAA was adopted by the House, prohibiting funds from fiscal year 2021 or earlier going to conduct or make preparations for explosive nuclear weapons tests. So we asked our members to urge the representatives to strike the section adding the $10 million to the Senate NDAA and to support the section that called for prohibiting funds, to fencing off those funds being used to prepare for a nuclear weapons test. And again, we have a one pager on the website for details of that. And so the first advocacy item we have going this year, and you've seen it come through your email, I hope, and hope that you've participated. This is our first item. Given that the US and Russia together own over 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, steady progress to reduce and eliminate those massive arsenals is a necessary step. As we all know, the New START treaty will expire in 2026, and it's already being slowly dismantled and unraveling since Russia suspended its participation in February of this year. And this week, Russia notified the US that they will not be providing the data about their force structure, and the US in response said it will not do that either. According to the strictures of the treaty, we're supposed to do that twice a year. So we recently held a webinar to discuss some of these issues. So it's important that we can continue to show support for a successor to New START, that it's important even in the hardest of times that we continue to do nuclear diplomacy, even with those that we find it hardest to do. You can see a recording of the session that we had. The webinar is on our website, as well as other information about this digital advocacy. But what we asked our members to do is to send a letter to your elected representatives, urging them to express support for the president's effort to press Russia to allow the resumption of New START inspections, which have been suspended during COVID, but Russia declared that they wouldn't participate anymore last August, and to negotiate a new arms control agreement. So the letter that you get when you fill out the form on our website gives some suggested text, but then you can personalize that to yourself, your member, your interests. And so the current advocacy strategy that we're thinking of as a framework for what we're planning to do in fiscal year, in this calendar year, is set up in a way that we can meet our mission statement. We're always looking for opportunities for advocacy along these lines, including legislative pieces and connecting to the administration. The framework is to build support for diplomatic engagement and to make sure that we don't do things that would be irreversible, that would make it harder to do once the time is right for resumption of negotiations, to do risk reduction and arms control the best we can, and to also build support in Congress to make sure we don't have any domestic roadblocks to those processes, including new nuclear technologies which are destabilizing, such as the new nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile that Stephen mentioned, a real close look at ballistic missile defenses and what the right posture is there. And so we also have, of course, we're mobilizing scientists through initiatives that encourage the US and global leaders to reinforce norms against nuclear weapons use and threats of use. So you'll have seen our call to a scientist's statement that you were encouraged, hopefully that you've seen and have signed. And we have more advocacy that we hope to do with that. So as my colleagues mentioned, with a great intro, we're coming up on the budget in the budget season, and there'll be hopefully many opportunities for us to weigh in on all of these things.